Welcome in. It is college football smothered and covered. Beautiful Tuesday here in Atlanta, and a beautiful Tuesday for you, the listener and the viewer, because it is SEC day. That is correct. We get to pick our SEC game by game results as well as who will win the conference. It'll be a big day. And of course, you know how I roll. These will be pinned to the top of my X profile for the entire season. Hey, thanks for listening to College Football Smothered and Covered, powered by Locked On. If this is your first listen, you need to make it your first listen. If it's not, you need to make it your first listen. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And of course, now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Okay. Look, we all have to have takes, right? We all have to go on the record. We all have to give you fodder to tell us how stupid we are throughout the course of the season and after the season. And if you're a first-time listener, if you don't know who I am, I've done the end of the season accountability article every single season since 2009 when I was at College Football News. That's how old I am. But this will be pinned, so you will get to see this all season and yell at me after the season. And here it is. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see the fancy graphic. If you're listening, I'm going to go run through every single pick, every single record. So it might get a little annoying, but stick with me. Texas 12-0, 8-0 in the SEC. That is correct. Texas undefeated. Georgia 11-1, 7-1. Ole Miss 10-2, 6-2. LSU 10-2, 6-2. Alabama 10-2, 6-2. Tennessee 9-3, 5-3. Texas A&M 8-4, 5-3. Auburn 8-4, 4-4. Oklahoma 8-4, 4-4. Florida 7-5, 4-4. Kentucky 7-5, 3-5. Missouri 7-5, 3-5. South Carolina 5-7, 2-6. Mississippi State 4-8, 1-7. Arkansas 3-9, 0-8. Vanderbilt 3-9, 0-8. So just ran through, and I think the first thing I said when going through that graphic, which will be pinned on my X profile, so you can see it if you're just listening on Apple or Spotify or wherever, is Texas undefeated in the regular season. 12-0, 8-0. And I know the first thing you're probably going to say is, what the hell am I smoking? And I sort of get it. What am I smoking? Well, look, Texas is back. I mean, there's no doubt about it that Texas is back. They went to the playoff last year. They went to Alabama. They won a double-digit game on the road. And they have dudes everywhere inside. That's the biggest thing with Texas and with any SEC champion or national champion. You got to have girth. You got to have depth. You got to have everything up front. Texas has got that. Now, look, if you don't know Kelvin Banks, get to know him. He's going to be a first-round draft pick. 30-year starting. They return 4 of their 5 offensive linemen and 2 of their 4 defensive linemen up front. And look, I'm not the biggest, like for some teams, I'm not the biggest, hey, returning starters guy. Because some of these returning starters might suck, but not for teams like Texas. You got one of the best quarterbacks in the country, one of the top 2 anyway. You got a great offensive line. You got a deep defensive line. And I know what you're going to think is Xavier Worthy's not there. None of these wide receivers are worth a damn or whatever. Blah, 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 blah. They're about 6 deep. Watch out for Silas Bolden. Human joystick. Transferred in. Can do a lot with him. DeAndre Moore. I'm not the biggest Isaiah Bond guy, but the talent is there. If he gets out of his head, he can be a superstar. Jonte Cook. These are studs. You don't know these names, but you're gonna know these names. And so beyond that, you look at the schedule, right? Georgia at home. That's the big one. Georgia at home. Look, I'm looking down at this schedule. It is very navigable in the SEC. And really, if you count Michigan week 2, I have them 12-0, Texas 12-0, so you have to count that. But we're talking about SEC picks. October 19th is going to be one of the biggest games in Texas history. New conference, de facto dynasty coming in, 2 superstar quarterbacks, provided everybody stays healthy. This team's going to run the table as long as they stay healthy. And I know what you're going to say. Hey, Jaden Blue's the only running back. And look, I get it. The running back depth is a problem. They lost 2, including CJ Baxter. Talk to some people around Texas. Jaden Blue is probably going to be the guy anyway. He was going to be the 1A. The offensive line cures a lot of ills. So I'm not really worried at running back. Now, if Jaden Blue goes down, then yes, 100%. So what about Georgia? Does Georgia take a step back? No, the answer is no. It's just they're walking into a Lions Den, the biggest game in Texas history, at least going back until 2009. But a lot of the same things can be said about Georgia. That can be said about Texas. Superstar quarterback, experienced offensive line. Not the biggest Trevor Etienne guy at running back, but I certainly think him alongside, some of the other dudes, including Robinson, will be fine. Now, wide receiver, you got to replace Bowers. You got to replace Ladd McConkey. I think they'll be okay. Ra Thomas is dismissal. Whatever. I don't really care. Dominic Lovett's proven it in the SEC. Oscar Delp at tight end. I think he'll be fine. The question is maybe secondary, but they'll figure that out. It's like just they go to a science lab on the campus, University of Georgia, and just clone somebody, and they're fine. So 11-1. Regular season loss to Texas. They get their revenge. Georgia will get its revenge in Atlanta. It's really hard to beat a team twice in the same season. You got to be an absolute monster to do it. Texas, I think, is a national championship caliber team. It's not a monster when compared to Georgia and potentially other teams around the country. Kirby Smart's too smart, pun very much intended, to get fooled by Steve Sarkisian twice. So I think they get their revenge in Atlanta. Georgia goes to the playoff. Texas goes to the playoff. But what about everybody else? Look, I didn't factor tiebreakers into this graphic. I just put Ole Miss, LSU, and Alabama all at 10-2, 6-2, because I just honestly am too lazy to go dig deep. And it's almost impossible to do that, because then you're predicting run point differential and division title. I'm going to be wrong about some of these things, not a lot of them, because I think I'm pretty smart and pretty dumb. But it's going to be too difficult to go through tiebreakers. But LSU, Ole Miss, and Alabama 10-2, 6-2. I think Ole Miss is capable of winning a national championship. I think Alabama could be, and I think LSU is a team that's being slept on. All 3 of those teams will go to the college football playoff. Now, I know you're saying, well, 5 SEC teams. Well, yeah, that's 5 SEC teams. Usually people talk about 4, maybe 3. There's a reason for it, and you'll find out when we do Big Ten predictions. The Big Ten is too deep than everybody else. So I think when you're talking about the SEC getting 3 or 4, you're also counting on the Big Ten getting 3 or 4. I don't think that's going to happen this year. That's why a 5th SEC team gets in. Now let's talk about LSU. Schedule sets up well. Best offensive line, I think, in the entire country. They return guys, like 6 guys who have started. And that's not even a joke. That's not exaggeration. 6 guys have started in that offensive line. A very deep and versatile running back core. A quarterback in Garrett Nussmeier, who I trust. I think he can be a superstar. Certainly not Jaden Daniels, but still good enough. Really good to make up for whatever steps the defense doesn't make. I know Malik Nabers is gone. But Lacey's a really good wide receiver. They can get creative in a bunch of different ways. But the problem was on defense last year, right? Blake Baker, great defensive coordinator. They can't be as bad as they were last year. So a small step forward for the defense, a small step back from the offense, and they should still be competitive, be a 10-2 type team. And the schedule sets up well. So if you're talking about an LSU team that's pretty much in terms of results the same as last year, but the schedule is easier, bam, 10-2. And you know about my love for Ole Miss if you've watched this show. And obviously with Alabama, look, you don't get a mulligan necessarily if you're at Alabama, but you get some grace. And so 10-2 making the playoff, probably not winning it, maybe a first round exit. Okay, fine. Deal with it. It's totally cool. Alabama, I think I need to see their receivers before I believe them. And aside from Moore, what's the secondary look like? And there's no blueprint for this, right? There's no blueprint for this, for how to replace the greatest coach of all time in this era. So I think that's the biggest thing for Alabama. You can go back to this graphic, and I think we're gonna quickly touch on a couple other teams before we take a break. But as you can see, the one that kind of looks a little weird is Auburn at 8-4 and 4-4. Schedule sets up well. I've talked to a lot of people down at Auburn. They are not only very happy with what Peyton Thorne has done, but very happy with the offensive line and the receivers, especially the receivers. Peyton Thorne was a problem last year, but he was a problem because of people around him for the most part. We don't know what his upside is. He's not going to be a superstar, but he can still be effective. Why can he be effective this year? Nobody got open last year. Now you've got three dudes who can be a stud. Cam Coleman, freshman, monster. Keandre Lambert-Smith, Penn State, stud. Got three more transfers in. Robert Lewis from Georgia State, Joy State. And all Peyton Thorne needs is just a little bit of help from his offensive line. And they've got that because they know they can run the ball. They return like 175% of their production. Not really, but Jarquez Hunter's a superstar. They got dudes behind him. So Auburn at 8-4, 4-4 might jump out. And then the last one that jumps out, Missouri fans, I'm sorry, not sorry. Michael Harris II quotes 7-5 and 3-5. And I know Missouri fans are probably like, what in the hell is he smoking? The schedule sets up pretty well. Does it though? Does it though? Got to go to Texas A&M. You got to go to Alabama. You get Auburn. You got to go to South Carolina, which is always tough. And you don't have Cody Schrader. Now, look, I know I love Eli. I really do. And he addressed the running back problem in the transfer portal to an extent. But can you trust these guys? Can you trust these guys to do what Cody did? No, you can't. I like Carroll, but I just don't think they can be what Missouri fans expect. And look, Brady Cook is a stud. I get it. But I just don't think Missouri has what it takes to repeat last year because the offense is not going to be as balanced. Plus, defensive line-wise, you suffered some depth issues in fall camp or some injuries in fall camp. That really hurts as well. We're going to take a break. We'll talk about game-by-game predictions. You will see my helmet schedule for every team in the SEC. Where are the wins? Where are the losses? You'll see it next. But first, this show brought to you by Ibotta. Ibotta is the free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop. You earn hundreds of items from groceries to beauty supplies, even toys, so you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. And you know what? There's a lot of inflation going around right now. The average Ibotta user earns $256 per year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, that flight that you've been eyeing, or a fancy dinner that you've been craving. Other apps give you points that don't amount to much with Ibotta. You earn cash back that you can withdraw from your bank account, PayPal, or gift card. Simply add offers in the app, upload your receipt, and voila, the money is yours. There are over 2,400 brands and over 1,000 retailers, including Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more that are on the Ibotta app. It's time that you joined over 50 million users who use Ibotta and earn cash back every single day. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using the code LOCKEDONCollege when you register. That's right, $5 just for trying by using the code LOCKEDONCollege when you register. Just go to the app Store, Google Play, download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back and use Locked On College. That's Ibotta, Ibotta, in your app store. Code Locked On College. College football is back on the Locked On College Football podcast, and it kicks off this Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time with the live season preview on the Locked On 24/7 College streaming YouTube channel. This 4-part series covers each of the 4 major conferences with discussion on which ACC, Big Ten, Big 12, and SEC teams have a shot at the expanded college football playoff. Be sure to check out this special streaming on the Locked On College Football 24/7 YouTube channel on Amazon Fire TV, part of the Locked On College Podcast Network. Your team every day. All right. Game by game picks. This will be on X as well. So if you're listening, you can check it out. Look, it's kind of hard to see if you're watching on YouTube, but let's go through some of the big ones. Some of the ones that everybody's talking about. Texas A&M. We'll start from the back, move forward. Texas, I told you, 12-0, 8-0. Not only will that be a game that we've waited on for a decade, it will be the wildest atmosphere of the season. The Texas A&M game will be one that we talk about forever. I think Texas goes in undefeated. But Texas A&M has that fight. It's going to be unbelievable in terms of the atmosphere, and it will go down to the last minute with Texas's SEC chances, maybe not on the line, but an undefeated regular season on the line, even if they are already going to the SEC championship game. I can't wait for it. Best game of the season. It will be the best game of the season. What about the rest? What about some other big-time games on this list? I think one that jumps out more than anything else, LSU. Go look at first week in November, LSU beating Alabama in Red Stick. Y'all remember what happened last year when Jaden Daniels got hurt? LSU does. Guarantee you LSU does. Look, I talked about LSU in the previous segment. Kalen DeBoer is not ready for Death Valley. He has never seen anything like it. Alabama's players have. Some of them anyway. A lot of transfers, so, maybe not all of them. But is Kalen DeBoer ready for what's coming to him? I don't think so. I think LSU's offensive line gets the job done. I think those receivers bust off a couple of big plays, and LSU makes a statement. I think before that game, before LSU and Alabama, I have LSU with a loss to Ole Miss. Now, will that kind of knock them out of the discussion a little bit? Yeah, maybe a little bit. So it'll seem kind of like they're coming out of nowhere, kind of like they did 2 years ago in that overtime game. And that's when the world will come to its senses and realize these Tigers, don't sleep on those Tigers. Brian Kelly's a winner. Brian Kelly's a winner. You're going to see it in that game. All right, some other big ones. Some other big ones that I think need to be discussed. How about right out of the gate? How about Florida, Miami? Now, I know there's a lot of people talking about Billy Napier. Will he get fired? How will he get fired? Will he survive the first half of the season going into that gauntlet? I think the answer is yes. And I think in that season opener next week, you're going to see a Florida team that is inspired by its coach, but also one that I think will have a much better chance of actually stretching the field, a much better chance of pounding the rock. Now, a lot of that does sort of depend on Montrell Johnson, but I'm not as down on these wide receivers. Jackson and Wilson have played. I know Pearsall's gone, but I mean, it's Graham Mertz. Graham Mertz is a good player. I was wrong about Graham Mertz last year, and I'll readily admit that. So, what will be the narrative after this? I posted on X some odds that, who will be fired in terms of coaches first, and Billy led the odds. But Cristobal's on there, and Cristobal's not going to get fired. Unless they go 3-9, he's not getting fired. 4-8, he's not getting fired. But you can say that about a lot of coaches. Or he makes dumb time management decisions every single game. But what would happen if Napier and Florida win by double digits in the Swamp? It's going to give Florida fans hope. I'm not saying they're going to do that, but this is still a good Florida team. This is a Florida team that has talent. I think they can be a balanced offense. I think they'll be able to help out that running game with an effective passing game. I think they'll be able to give Graham Mertz enough time to find those receivers. I think you're going to see a much different Florida team against Miami than maybe people are expecting. I think there's a sort of expectation that Florida's just going to come out. They've heard all this noise and they're going to just collapse. I think Billy's too good of a coach for that. On the field, if he has his organization structured correctly, he's a good coach. The problem at Florida is not that Billy's a bad coach. It's that Billy did not create a system that can be successful as a corporation from the top down. I don't think he was ready for the SEC in that regard. He's very much ready as a coach. And I firmly believe that. And I know I'm in the minority. But I think he'll show it against Miami. I can't wait to watch that game. I think he'll show it against Miami. All right, last one on the game-by-game predictions. And again, if you're listening, you can check it out. It'll be posted to X, or you can just watch on YouTube some of the games, all the games that I pick one by one. Oklahoma fans probably don't like this. I have them losing to Auburn, Texas, Alabama, and LSU. Is that a huge deal? Those last three, Oklahoma is not near where they should be. The Auburn game, I think, is the one that sort of stands out. And you're like, what? First true road game. Okay. First true road game. I don't think Jackson Arnold's going to be ready. Brent Venables understands what it's like in the SEC. He's been there as an assistant at Clemson. But you're going to tell me that a team in Oklahoma with a ton of turnover on the offensive side of the ball is going to be able to go in and take care of business at Jordan-Hare. Kirby Smart even said it at Media Days that Auburn's the toughest place to play. I talked to Carson Beck about it. He said it was just he wasn't ready for it. I don't think Jackson Arnold's going to be ready for it. Now, defensively, Oklahoma's legit, man. I think they'll be able to keep that game close. I think they'll be able to slow down the Auburn offense. They will not be able to stop it because, like I said earlier in this show, Auburn's offense is going to be better than people realize. But I can't wait to see that game. I can't wait to see what the Sooners do. That's a tough schedule, man. That is a tough schedule, especially in the back half, or at least from late September on. Auburn, bye. Texas, South Carolina, at Ole Miss, at Missouri, whatever. Alabama and LSU to close it out. Man, good luck with that. Reminder, the show brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We'll have something a little different for you now through September 22nd. All FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with your YouTube base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out of market game. All you need is a Google account. Who doesn't have a Google account? And a current form of payment, you can cancel it at any time. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back. All right. Before we wrap things up in this show, I love Lane Kiffin. I do. This is the SEC show, so of course we have to talk about Lane Kiffin. Lane is not the best pitch man. Now, for those who do not know Lane Kiffin, I think there's this sort of narrative out there that he's this crazy dude that is full of all these one-liners and all this other stuff. And that's not true. Like, that's not true. It takes a lot to get Lane Kiffin to talk. In fact, when I was at CBS, we had every coach for 10 minutes, and I got to interview Lane Kiffin for 10 minutes just because the way it worked out between three of us, Dennis Dodd, Josh Pate, I got Lane Kiffin. And the producer for our show had not been to SEC Media Days before, and he was all jacked up about Lane Kiffin and interviewing, seeing him and whatever. And at the end of it, he's like, damn, how did you get more than 5 minutes out of that guy? It's hard to do it. It's hard to do it. So earlier this week, he was in a press conference. Of course, there's the Dasani bottle and the Coca-Cola bottle sitting there on the podium. And Lane says this. Check this out.
Questions? Does anybody drink Coke? You realize that 130% of your sugar for the entire day is in this one bottle.
You have to eat 15 oranges to get the sugar out of Coke.
65 grams of sugar.
When was the last time you had a Coke?
A long time. I don't know. Chris Lowe drinks Coke, though. I do know that. All right. See you guys.
What? Lane, buddy, I love you. I'll text you about this after the show, after I'm done recording. You have to be a better pitch man, bro. What was that? What was that? At first, I thought that was AI. Everything's AI right now, right? I thought it was AI, and I was like, there's no way he actually did that. But I don't know. Like I said in the show, I still think they're going to be 10-2 and 6-2. They might need some new sponsors. I don't know, bro. I don't know. Hey, thank you for listening to this episode of College Football Smothered and Covered, powered by Locked On. Making it your first listen today. Now go check out Locked On College Football. From NIL deals and never-ending conference realignment rumors, Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron. You can find the link to Locked On College Football in the description below, so don't need to search for it at all. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Leaving for Dublin, Ireland tomorrow, baby. Tomorrow. There will be a show tomorrow morning. My flight's at 3:30, so we'll still have time. It'll be ACC day. We'll do ACC predictions. You'll also hear from Georgia Tech coach Brent P. One-on-one. Brent Key, one-on-one. Sorry about that, Brent. You'll hear that tomorrow. Until then, have a great day, everybody. Talk to you soon.